We drove out past the last strip of pavement until the GPS gave up and the stars took over. It was the kind of Arizona night that feels endless hot still air, a ceiling of bright constellations, and the hush of desert that makes normal sounds seem huge. A group of us 6 total had piled into 2 trucks and an SUV bounced down a jeep track and set up camp well off the beaten path. Coolers, a cheap canopy, a couple of tents, a small fire that looked heroic in the dark. We laughed, drank too much, told the usual stupid stories, and then one by one fell into the thin privacy of nylon and sleeping pads. Sometime after midnight, when the fire had smoldered down to embers and the crickets had their long, desert rhythm, I woke to a sound that made me freeze. Sniffing. It was soft at first, like someone breathing a little too close to a screen door. The kind of slow, methodical sniff that has intent to it. Not a raccoon messing with a cooler, not a coyote passing through. I thought, at first, that it had to be an animal. Bears are rare down there, but raccoons and dogs can get curious. Maybe one of the guys didn't tie up the trash. Maybe it was nothing. Then the sound moved. From our tent it edged over to the next tent, and I felt every person in mine tense up and do that quiet, mutual check. A light squeeze of an a breath that said, "You awake?" Instantly everyone was awake, aware, listening. No whispering, no movement that would announce us to whatever was outside. After few seconds of that tense stillness, a figure popped up out of the neighboring tent and immediately started shouting and making noise. He had a gun, a hand cannon he likes to bring on trips, and he banged a pot, whooped, and screamed at the top of his lungs. The noise was meant to scare. It was meant to be the loud, aggressive, get out of here sound you make when you want someone to run. For few awful heartbeats, the sniffing stopped. Then I heard footsteps, not animal feet but human steps. Hurried, stumbling, and a curse. The flashlight beam bounced and for a second I saw a hunched silhouette riffling through a cooler, the white of a t-shirt in the light. He looked up, saw the gun pointed at him, and bolted into the dark. We chased him for a minute, boots on gravel, but the desert swallows sound and man swallows man. He melted into the scrub and was gone. We didn't get the guy or his face properly or anything useful enough to identify him. We did, however, find our cooler scattered, food pilfered, and the inside of 2 tents rifled through. After a quick headcount and some swearing, we packed up everything that could fit back into the trucks in 20 minutes flat and left. No one in our group slept that night. Everyone was too wired, too aware of how close a stranger had gotten to our sleeping bodies. We told ourselves it was an isolated incident. A creep looking for a free meal and an adrenaline thrill. Time heals a lot of things, and dudes in their 20s are stubborn. A year later, we were back in the Sam general area with the Sam reckless sense of immunity. This time, paranoid and smarter, tents were off the table. We'd all slept in the beds of our trucks and SUVs. Hard to sneak into a Tacoma bed, right? That was the thinking. It was later, well after midnight, and the lull of quiet had kicked in. I crashed out in the back of our SUV with my girlfriend beside me. At some point I drifted into that deep, false sleep you only get when you've been drinking and the road has finally stopped rocking. Then I felt a sharp beam of light across my face. A flashlight, close enough that the brightness forced a flinch out of my eyelids. My hand went cold. If I jerked it upright, it would have given him contact. I've learned more than I care to remember from stupid horror movies. Don't let them know you're awake. Don't give them the satisfaction. So I lay there, breath shallow, pretending, counting heartbeats against the metal of the truck bed. Beside me, my girlfriend didn't move. Later she admitted she'd felt the light but stayed still too. The light swung across the camp. It hit the next truck, then another, skittering like an insect over sleeping faces. I heard the soft sighs of breath, a snore by the fire that sounded huge in the small world of that campsite. The beam stopped at our group like it had weight. I blinked slowly and glanced up. The man standing in the dark was older than I expected. Not a kid doing a dare, not some punk looking for laughs. He was thin, long-limbed, and he didn't move like someone startled. He stood there and just watched. No attempt to hide, no rustle of rummaging. Just a slow, methodical survey of sleeping bodies, his light sweeping over chests and blankets as if cataloging them. When his light finally moved away, I bolted out of the truck like my life depended on it. I woke the others, whisper shouting that there was a guy walking through the campsite staring at people. Most of them had been pretending to sleep, too, maybe the same logic as me. And we all felt that dark cocktail of rage and fear. We didn't go near him. That was too stupid. But the mood shifted from adrenaline to cold practicality. We packed up everything that could be taken in minutes. We locked the vehicles as best we could. And then we hauled us out of there under the first weak purple of pre-dawn that made the scrub look faint and ordinary again. The weird thing about those nights isn't just the violation. It's the lingering optical illusions afterwards. You see movement at the edge of your vision for weeks. You double-check the latches on every cooler. You don't sleep as deeply. And the anger stays. That hot little ember that makes people in town roll their eyes when you tell the story. You should have called the cops. People say, why didn't you fight him? Because when someone is shadowing your sleep, the smartest moves are the ones that keep you intact for another day. We never ran into the man again. We told each other theories. Meth head, local hillbilly looking for food, some weird loner who likes to watch people sleep. None of it really matters. The point is, in the middle of nowhere, with only the stars and your stupid sense of invulnerability, people can get close enough to you to sniff your breath and stare at your sleeping chest and disappear like they were never there. If there's a moral, it's this. Don't romanticize remote camping as some pure communion with nature. Take precautions. Secure your food. Keep a light on. Consider earplugs if you're trying to sleep. You'll need them for the silence. And you'll regret them if something's out there. And if you hear sniffing outside your tent, don't assume it's wildlife. Be loud. Be aggressive. Make a scene. Get the hell out of there if you can. That desert is beautiful in the daytime, but at night it shelters a lot of things that don't ask permission. Camp outside Tucson. Maybe not. We had a guy walk through our site, sniff tents and dig through coolers. Year later he came back to stand and shine his light on people while they slept. We packed up and left both times. Don't be brave, be smart. We started calling it The Ritual when we were 14. Me and my best friend, two dumb kids convinced we were cooler than everyone else. Every summer at the state park we'd pitch tents, roast hot dogs. And then, as the night settled in and the adults fell quiet, we'd slip away from the campsites and walk into the woods. There was something about moving through the trees at night that felt like a secret. The hush of leaves, the way flashlights turned the trunks into pillars, the small bravery of being somewhere you weren't supposed to be. That particular night we got cocky. The moon was thin, the air cool, and the trail looked inviting. So we decided to go farther than usual, half a mile past where we normally turn back. We had flashlights, of course, but the whole point of the ritual was to try to get through a stretch of woods with them off, feeling our way by memory and the faint light of the sky. It was stupid and thrilling in equal measure. At first it was all laughter and nervous jokes. Don't chicken out. Bet you won't go past that big oak. That kind of thing. Then, Not quite suddenly, but like a thing that uncalled slowly, we heard whispering behind us. Soft, breathy, like two people leaning close to share a secret. It was close enough to be clearly human and far too close for comfort. We hit our flashlights and spun around. Nothing. Just trunks and the pale wash of moonlight and our own two shaking shadows. We told ourselves it was an animal, a breeze in the leaves, our imaginations keeping time with every horror movie we'd ever watched. We kept walking, louder now, the beam of the flashlight cutting a narrow tunnel through the dark. Then the whispering again, the same soft sounds, but this time right behind us, almost at our heels. We stopped, and the silence that followed felt heavy, like a held breath. We trained the lights in circles, peering into the brush and between trunks, looking for the obvious, a drunk camper, an idiot kid pulling a prank, a raccoon. Nothing moved. And then we saw her. She was only a few feet off the trail, crawling on her hands and knees through the leaf litter, her clothes dark and filthy, dirt matted into her hair. She was whispering to herself, words that didn't make sense. Fragments, names, the kind of muttering you don't expect to hear from someone who has just lost their way. For a second I felt the kind of cold that lives in a movie theater when the lights go down and everyone knows the jump scare is coming. When she saw our flashlight, she stopped and, suddenly upright, announced like it was the most ordinary thing in the world that she was looking for her campsite. She stood there, blinking, and you could see the confusion in her face. Not menace, not malice. Just a muddled mind trying to make sense of trees at midnight. We helped her up. She smelled of sweat and stale beer. Her speech was slurred, her steps uncertain. We walked her back the way we'd come, the flashlight beams bobbing, while she listed off partial directions that made no sense. By the big fire, near the blue truck, down the hill with the rocks. Each landmark she named belonged to some campsite we'd passed earlier or to places that were vague and shifting in her memory. It turned out she'd wandered off looking for a bathroom and gotten hopelessly lost, drunk or high or both. The exact mix didn't really matter at the time. Her friends had apparently not noticed she'd been gone. If we hadn't pushed ourselves farther into the woods that night, she might have wandered until morning, cold and terrified and maybe worse. I'll be honest. When I first saw her crawling, I felt raw fear. The whispered words, the crawling, the dirt. It hit the primal part of my brain that expects danger in the woods at night. But as we guided her back and watched her reunite with a group who finally realized she was missing, the fear softened into a different kind of creepiness. The awareness of how small mistakes become dangerous decisions after dark. How thin the line is between harmless mischief and something that can go very wrong. We never called it the ritual again after that summer. Instead, whenever we went camping, we stuck to the trails we knew, left the flashlights on, and double-checked that everyone was accounted for. The memory of woman crawling and whispering in the dark stayed with me, not because it was supernatural or violent, but because it revealed how quickly the ordinary can turn eerie, and how sometimes the scariest thing is just lost, human and scared. It was one of those summer camping trips that started out completely normal. My siblings and I, our gear packed up, a small tent pitched by the lake, and sky that looked calm and inviting in the late afternoon. We were laughing, skipping stones, and enjoying the kind of freedom that comes when kids get few days away from adults and schedules. But as the evening crept in, the first hints of something bigger began to appear on the horizon. The clouds rolled in slowly at first, darkening the edges of the sky, then gathering into shapes that felt almost alive. There was a crackle in the air, a smell of ozone, and an electricity you can feel on your skin when a storm is about to hit. Then it hit. Lightning exploded across the lake, striking with a force that made the water flare and shimmer unnaturally. It wasn't the usual, scattered summer thunderstorm. This storm was massive, relentless. The sky became constant flash of white light, lightning arcing endlessly, crawling through clouds that seemed to stretch forever. The thunder followed immediately, rolling and crashing in a roar that drowned out everything else. Every clap felt like the world itself was cracking apart. The wind picked up next, and it wasn't just a breeze. It was a full-on, violent force that bent the trees and shredded the calm we'd had only minutes earlier. The tent we had spent hours setting up suddenly felt flimsy and pointless. One gust caught the fabric and began lifting it off the ground, whipping the poles around like matchsticks. For a brief moment, we considered staying in the tent, huddled together, hoping it would hold. But the wind's strength and the constant roar of thunder convinced us otherwise. We bolted, grabbing what we could, and ran to the car. Every step was a battle against the gusts, our hair whipping across our faces, rain starting to sting like needles. Inside the car, we watched helplessly as our tent, our home for the weekend, was ripped from the ground and hurled into a nearby tree. The poles bent and snapped, the fabric twisted and shredded in the wind. The car itself shook violently as the storm pressed down on us from every side. Every rattle and bam made it feel like the vehicle could lift off or be crushed at any second. We didn't wait to see what would happen next. Trembling, soaked, and wide-eyed, we started the engine and drove 20 minutes through pounding rain and roaring winds to my grandpa's house, the nearest place of safety. The storm didn't let up for the rest of the night. We huddled inside, watching lightning illuminate the windows like strobe lights, and listening to the deep, rolling thunder that seemed endless. The next morning, the aftermath was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. When we returned to the campsite, part of it was completely closed off. Trees had been torn from the ground, blocking roads and paths. Signs of a small tornado were evident. Debris scattered, flattened grass, and splintered branches. It was impossible to tell whether the tornado had hit during our near miss or just afterward. But one thing was certain, it had been dangerously close. We cleaned up what we could of our campsite, salvaging whatever wasn't destroyed, but some things were gone forever. My sleeping bag, for example, had vanished, either carried off by the storm or buried under debris. Even now, I can't forget the sheer power of that storm. The noise, the wind, the flashes of lightning, and the feeling of helplessness while watching the world around me tear itself apart. It wasn't just storm. It was nature showing its teeth, reminding us how small we really are. From that day on, I've never taken a calm sky for granted. And I'll never forget the night when a summer storm became something that could shake the ground, lift tents, and leave me shaken to my core. I was out in the bush, hunting upland birds, taking advantage of the quiet of early morning. The air was crisp, the kind of silence that feels alive, where even the smallest crack of a twig or distant bird call echoes unnaturally. I decided to take a shortcut through a small valley to reach another area I wanted to scout. The trail was narrow, lined with low shrubs and scattered trees, and I was alone except for the occasional rustle of wildlife. It was the kind of place that feels isolated, beautiful, and completely removed from civilization. As I was making my way through the valley, I spotted movement ahead. My steps slowed instinctively, and then I saw him. A man standing squarely on the trail, an AR-15 cradled in his hands, pointed slightly downward but at the ready. Immediately, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. My stomach dropped, and my instinct screamed that this wasn't a place I wanted to be. My heart started hammering, and I forced myself to breathe, to stay calm. I raised my hand slightly, trying to appear non-threatening, and called out, just out bird hunting. How are you doing? He paused. His eyes scanned me, unblinking, calculating. After long, tense silence, he finally muttered, "Fine." Long pause. "I'm hunting deer." Something didn't add up. For one, deer season wasn't open, and an AR-15 isn't legal for hunting deer. Even more telling, he wasn't dressed for hunting. His clothes were grimy, worn, and clearly hadn't been changed or washed in days. Dirt and grime streaked his skin, his hair unkempt, face unshaven. He looked emancipated, like someone who had been living rough for a long time. If you imagined the scariest 50-year-old meth addict you could, put an AR-15 in his hands, and you might get close to what I saw. Trying to diffuse the situation, I asked cautiously, "Do you know the best way for me to find some birds?" He glanced at me, and I could see the sharpness in his eyes increase. "Well, I imagine you might find some back the way you came," he said, his voice low but edged with a dangerous authority. That subtle emphasis on back the way you came made my stomach knot. I understood the hint loud and clear. I was not welcome, and pushing forward would be a very bad idea. I didn't wait. Slowly, keeping my movements deliberate and non-threatening, I turned and retraced my steps. Every crack of a branch under my boots felt deafening. My mind raced with possibilities. Was there a meth lab nearby? Were there other people like him lurking down the trail? I had no idea, and I didn't want to find out. The sense of unease didn't fade until I was well clear of the valley, back to where the trail opened and I could see the distant road. The next day, I reported the incident to the local sheriff. I explained what I had seen, where it had happened, and the man's behavior. They asked a few questions, noted my description, and promised to look into it. But I never heard anything more about it. Whether they found him, or whether he disappeared into the brush like some ghostly danger, I'll never know. Even now, thinking about it makes the hair on my arm stand up. There's something primal about seeing a stranger armed, unstable, and clearly capable of violence in a place where no one else can help you. That valley was beautiful, isolated, and peaceful until that moment. After that, every time I go hunting alone, even in daylight, there's part of me that checks over my shoulder, imagining that someone, somewhere, could be watching with the same dangerous intensity. It was one of the few times I've truly understood fear, not the kind that comes from suspenseful movies, or ghost stories, or storms, but the raw, undeniable fear of being completely alone and confronted by someone who could hurt you, with nothing between you and them except the thin air of the wilderness.